you are implementing or advocating. So in the context of the Constitution and secularism, benevolent neutrality means you take into account religion and you are somewhat friendly to religion, but of course, you still try to not establish a religion. Strict neutrality, you are definitely saying, I cannot accommodate you because I have to clear the lines of that non-establishment, right? The basis of those two philosophies for benevolent neutrality, for example, is it here? I'll try to go back to the previous one first. Yes. So benevolent neutrality, the reason why some people, justices, philosophers, will follow benevolent neutrality in terms of religion and the state is because it's an inevitable fact. It's an escapable fact that there are people who are religious. So they just take into account that in reality, the social fabric is that there are individuals who are very religious. And if there are people who are very religious, then we can take into account some leeway in terms of implementing policies that would promote free exercise but would not violate the establishment clause. For those people who believe strict neutrality, they do take into account that the social fabric is that people are religious, but also that there are irreligious individuals. So if we become too benevolent, it might harm or violate the rights of irreligious individuals, which has been talked about. So benevolent neutrality has been traditionally the standard of the Supreme Court in deciding whether or not a government action is constitutional or lawful or unconstitutional or illegal. So strict neutrality, though, is on the rise since 2010 and as recently as 2015, which we will later find out. So let's discuss benevolent neutrality. Let's try to find out more about benevolent neutrality. So what's benevolent neutrality as applied? So to be more specific, right? Under benevolent neutrality, government can pass policies or laws that benefit religion. It sounds not neutral, right? But because it's benevolent neutral, you can benefit religion as long as the benefit is incidental or secondary and there is a primary governmental purpose, right? So those are the standards when you can be benevolently neutral. Aside from that, in public spaces, religious expression is tolerated, if not encouraged, right? We can see this in the case of Aglipay versus Ruiz and the case of Estrada versus Escritor. Let's go to the next slide. So in Aglipay versus Ruiz, this was in 1937. So that's why I said traditionally, the standard is benevolent neutrality. So in Aglipay versus Ruiz, the International Eucharistic Congress was being held in Manila. The 33rd International Eucharistic Congress. For Cebuanos, I'm sure you know just recently, the 55th or the 51st, I think 51st IEC was held in Cebu. But 1937 was the 33rd. 2016 is the 51st. It's a bit weird. The number of International Eucharistic Congress. But anyway, so in 1937, it was held in Manila, and the government, stamps were uso pa nun. Uso pa yung stamps. People still use stamps then. Now, only lawyers and some people use stamps to send mail. But anyway, stamps were widely in use and taxable and profitable. So the government made stamps to commemorate the International Eucharistic Congress. But this is a Catholic or a Christian event, right? And stamps then, and even stamps now are made through the money of the government to print it. And then it's under the Director of Posts, which is a government officer, who is a government officer. So there was a question, Aglipay here, if he is familiar, is from the Aglipayan Church. He's against Catholicism and other denominations being established. So he's trying to reject that. So he filed a case against the Director of Posts, Ruiz, to stop stamps from being printed with the International Eucharistic Congress as the design. So there were stamps designed with a chalice, with grapes and wine, which are Catholic or Christian symbols specifically. So, like with the Filipino free thinkers, DepEd, they revised that. So they had a second stamp. They did not continue the original design because Agrippa was making noise. And eventually the design was a stamp which says International Eucharistic Congress, the map of the Philippines with Manila as highlighted and saying Manila, seat of the 33rd International Eucharistic Congress. So there was still a question. Is that new stamp, even if it was revised to remove the chalice, a specific Christian symbol or Catholic symbols, is it constitutional? Does it establish a religion? Does it violate separation of church and the state? So the Supreme Court said no. Why? And this is benevolent neutrality. Because while it might promote IEC or a Catholic event, they said that the benefit to religion was secondary. There was a primary government benefit or purpose, which was tourism and commemorating a historical event which might be religious but is still part of Philippine history. So that was one of the reasons. And then of course, the taxes that the stamps will get will still be used by the government, etc., etc. So this is an example of benevolent neutrality. You can benefit religion or you can be nice towards religion, but of course, still neutral in the sense that there is a primary governmental purpose. So this is how it's operationalized. Another case, Estrada versus Escritor, 2003-2006. These are two cases, a series of two cases, which involves a female court interpreter working in the judiciary. Working in the judiciary is very strict, very tough, because just any ounce of immorality or misconduct, you can be kicked out or disciplined. Unlike in politics, you have elected officials, it's easier to get away. But in the judiciary, generally it's tougher if you're immoral or doing something immoral. So what did she do that was immoral? She was being fired in the judiciary. She was in an extramarital relationship. So this is a woman who was already married, but they were separated in fact. And she was living together with another man who was also married. But of course, there's no divorce in the Philippines. So they had an extramarital affair in the context of them being married. Now in the judiciary, that's immoral. Because under our laws, public laws, secular laws, adultery is a crime. So it is a public morality that extramarital affairs, if you are married, is immoral. Right? So that's reasonable naman. That's not religious morality. But, so she was trying to be fired, or she was fired, and she raised to the Supreme Court the idea that she should be exempted from this idea of immorality because her own faith, religion, if I remember correctly, she was Jehovah's Witness. She had a certificate of togetherness from her church, right? To say that her church sanctions this extramarital affair because it is an exceptional case in a very specific instance which is allowed under Jehovah's beliefs, right? So she was saying, my right to religious freedom, free exercise is being violated if you will fire me for immorality because in my religion, it is not immoral. She was saying that. And in the end, the Supreme Court sided with her. And this is quite unusual because again, usually you are easily disciplined, right? And anyone who has an extramarital affair in the judiciary gets kicked out, gets disciplined, even if it's not part of the way they do their functions. Because judges, employees in the judiciary should be totally perceived to be very moral, something like that. But anyway, so she was exempted. Who was the female involved here? Escritor, not Estrada. And Estrada here is not related to Joseph Estrada. So Escritor was not fired. The Supreme Court sided with her. They said benevolent neutrality would allow for accommodation of this religious belief because one, there is a certification from her religion saying that it is not immoral. We can make some space for her. The decision is not really that logical, but I only tell you this to point to you that as recent as 2006, benevolent neutrality from 1937 to 2006 was the prevailing standard. That's why it's the traditional standard. But now, as I told you, recently, strict neutrality has been emerging in the Supreme Court, luckily, right? Strict neutrality, before we discuss the cases, The approach compared to benevolent neutrality is for strict neutrality, government may not pursue any laws or policies that benefit religion, even if it is secondary, even if it is incidental. So you cannot benefit religion. So maybe the case in Agrippa versus Lewis, if you look at it from strict neutrality, it would be unconstitutional. They would have stopped the stand, right? For strict neutrality, religious expression in public spaces is not tolerated. So it's not just not encouraged, it's not tolerated as well. For example, prayers in court. So judges usually pray before they start their hearings or cases. But the defense of the judiciary now is that it is a secular prayer. But of course, again, what about irreligious? What about those who don't want to pay? But anyway, if you are strictly neutral, those kinds of things should not happen in courts. So government may not pursue policies or laws based only on religious reasoning. In benevolent neutrality, you can pursue government policies or laws that are somehow inspired by religious reasoning. Why? Again, because the social fabric is that people are religious, right? But for strictly neutral, even just merely inspired, but definitely if it is exclusively based on religious reasoning, definitely, of course, it's a no-no. So, the cases that are emerging in terms of strictly neutral thought in the Supreme Court is the case of Angladlad versus Comelec. I'm not sure if you know, so this was the gay party list, Angladlad. And then, as recently, in 2015, Cheryl Santos versus St. Scholastica's College. I'm not sure if I have okay, so in Angladlad versus Comelec, the Comelec denied the party list registration of Angladlad, saying that Angladlad as a party list is not allowed because it is an immoral, advocating for immoral acts that contravene the Constitution allegedly. And its basis in saying that it was immoral under the Constitution or under our laws was that they cited the Bible and the Quran to say that homosexuality is immoral, it is not valid, etc. So anyway, the point is the Comelec in denying Angladlad cited the Bible and the Quran. So this was an easy case. When this was raised to the Supreme Court, even if it was benevolently neutral before, couldn't say it's okay. So they said, no, it's not okay because they use the Bible, they use the Quran. Definitely, it is not respecting the separation of church and the state. For Cheryl Santos versus St. Scholastica's College, this is better in terms of really proving strictly neutral. Because in Angladlad, you can just be like neutral. It's not really strictly neutral. In Cheryl Santos versus St. Scholastica's College, Cheryl Santos here was a teacher in St. Scholastica who was fired. She was fired because she had premarital sex. She got pregnant before she was married to a guy who was also not married. So she was not married, but she got pregnant. So they had premarital sex. She gave birth, and so she was fired because the school said, this is immorality. We cannot allow our students to see this role model, etc., etc. So they said this is valid as a basis for firing. So of course, she raised it all the way to the Supreme Court, where she won. The Supreme Court said that from a strictly neutral standpoint, while it is immoral for St. Scholastica, while it is immoral from the point of view of St. Scholastica, for premarital sex to be engaged, to have a baby before marriage, etc. For a strictly neutral standpoint in applying labor laws, they said we can only apply public morality. And so she cannot be fired because one, she is not married. So there is no extramarital affair here or adultery, which is a publicly morality-based law, like the idea of banning adultery or extramarital affairs. So anyway, Cheryl Santos won, and she got back wages, etc. So as recently, only as 2010, this strict neutrality is on the rise, right? So, because it's on the rise, strictly neutral, my discussion is for us to move forward in terms of trying to push for more strictly neutral decisions or philosophies. To combat the problem I told you, the threat to to our way of existence in terms of respecting people's beliefs and secularism. The problem is establishment creep, right? So you have a lot of politicians, congressmen, like Manny Pacquiao, who take into account their own personal religious beliefs, and the policeman who was distributing the Bible, doing things that they think, this is just normal, this is just okay. And so little by little, establishment creep means people in government or government itself incrementally, small steps or baby steps, almost imperceptible, you cannot perceive it, right? Like the accumulation of sand from the coast, etc. A long time, slowly creeping that it is indeed establishing a religion, right? That it is forcing us, for example, to believe in Christianity or specifically Catholicism, because that's the majority religion. So this is due to the existence of a religious majority, obviously, because they feel they're entitled or it's a normal thing, and it's also due to the benevolent neutrality approach. That's why I'm quite happy that strictly neutral is happening since 2010. But then, moving forward in terms of impact mitigation, we have to reinforce that idea of strict neutrality to combat establishment creep. So, I just wrote here 3 issues where HAPI, Filipino Free Thinkers, PATAS, and any other concerned citizen can actually try to file a case, which I think are winnable cases, to tell the Supreme Court, and then of course it will get media mileage, etc. discussion, about how we should be strictly neutral or reminding people about the idea of secularism. And for us, of course, on my part, if you would agree, it should be strictly neutral, not just neutral, not benevolent neutrality. So the 3 areas which I think are winnable, yes, these are winnable and very controversial and very attention-worthy for media. First, the very basic is the Supreme Court's official seal, which is revealed. Second, divorce, and then third, abortion. So now it's revealed. So the problem with the Supreme Court seal, what's the problem with the Supreme Court seal? So there are 2 tablets embedded within the scales of justice. And there can be no other interpretation that these 2 tablets are from Christianity. Why? 1, 2, 3 in one tablet, 4 to 10 in the other tablet. So it's the 10 Commandments. Because 2 tablets, right? In one tablet of Moses, that's the first 3, all related about God, right? And then the 4 to 10, all related to man and God and man relationship, right? So definitely, this is establishment of religion. Why? Because why is the Quran symbol not there? Why is any other religion not there? And as Andy said, even if you accommodate all religions, that is still not neutrality because you cannot prefer religions over irreligion, right? So, don't remove it. So for the Supreme Court, how do we do an impact litigation? So unlike my case, I don't suggest filing a petition, right? If you remember, RH law, Cybercrime Act, all of this have cases in the Supreme Court discussing the constitutionality. That is not how we should do it for this one. Why? Because the Supreme Court is the one that made this. So you do not file a case against the Supreme Court saying, Supreme Court, you did something unconstitutional, right? So the way to correct any unconstitutional act of the Supreme Court is usually done through a simple letter. But of course, with legal arguments. How do you do a letter? So it can either be through email in the modern times because the Supreme Court now allows email, or still the old-fashioned way, just a letter you will give in Manila, where Supreme Court is. But, so first, the way to do it is HAPI as a group, in alliance with other groups, PATAS, Filipino Free Thinkers, and maybe specific individuals who want their names there, right, can write a letter, and the letter must contain a request or a reminder. Supreme Court, hey, there's this separation of church and the state. Please look at your seal. There are the 2 tablets there. We think this is establishment. So of course, there are some legal arguments that will be put there, But we will not say the Supreme Court did something unconstitutional or violative of the Constitution. We will just tell them, this looks unconstitutional. Based on these arguments, can you please revise it? Something like that. This will still get media mileage, of course, in the sense that there are people inside the Supreme Court who leak things to the media when it's controversial, one. And then, of course, we as a group or people who will write the letter can also tell the media that they did such a thing. That's not prohibited anyway. Free speech, holding public officials accountable, even the Supreme Court. So that's one impact litigation. Why? Because this is the very institution you want to convince for other cases. If this institution itself establishes a religion and we cannot change the way they do it, then we would have a hard time doing the other lawsuits, right? So we have to change their very own mindset. But of course, the reason why I think it's winnable, and this is one of the first things we can do, is one, again, it's obviously establishment. But second, the people who made this seal were people in the 1990s, right? This has been already a discussion in 2006 or 8 that possibly it's unconstitutional. But one conservative justice said, let's not bother, it's a small issue, something like that. So we can make this an issue, and the justices now who are more liberal, from my perspective, from analyzing them, would easily agree to change this. So this is an easily winnable case because it's obviously an establishment, because it's a government seal. There is no governmental purpose in putting the 2 tablets. It does not secondarily benefit religion. It primarily benefits Catholicism, etc. You would find it surprising, divorce. So, I'm sure you know me as a very creative, if not, radical lawyer in suggesting how things can be changed. So like my same-sex marriage petition. But I don't think it's radical because I think it's easily winnable as well. This one, it looks like it's also radical. Like, how can we legalize divorce for everyone even if we don't go through Congress to pass a law that allows divorce? So like my petition, we can do it through a petition that attacks a certain law to say it is unequal, discriminatory, and so it should be made equal by the Supreme Court. And the effect would be, the Supreme Court would grant us divorce. How would that be? So, if you are reading recent events, in February 16, the Supreme Court recently affirmed a divorce between a Christian and a Muslim. Because under the Code of Muslim Personal Laws, so this is a specific law that applies to Muslims, there is divorce there. Because in the Muslim faith, they have the concept of divorce. Talaq, pas, I really don't know if I'm correctly pronouncing it. But, so, in Muslim faith, there's a concept of divorce. So, as benevolent and neutral, remember benevolent neutrality, right? The people who made the laws in the past said, oh, we have this Muslim minority, let's be benevolently neutral to them, let's make a law that will accommodate their religion. Good thing, because when they did that, they legalized divorce, but only for Muslims. Now, how do we do that if ever for non-Muslims, right? We can challenge it on the grounds that there is no difference on the grounds that Muslims can claim with the grounds that we should be able to claim that they are claiming now. For example, the basis for divorce for Muslims, for 2 Muslims who are married, is either adultery, unusual cruelty, insanity, affliction of incurable disease, negligence in family support, and more other grounds. There are other grounds. These are just the most common ones, right? Now, these things, it can happen to you. It can happen to me if you're married, right? I mean, it's not as if only Muslims can suffer from adultery. It's not as if only Muslims can suffer from negligence in family support. So, under the Equal Protection Clause, the Equal Protection Clause is Article 3, Section 1, no person shall be denied the equal protection of the laws. Government cannot pass any law granting a certain right to one group and denying it to another group if there is no difference, right? So there should be a difference. Of course, the government might say, well, they're Muslims. That's the difference. It's in the religion, right? But if you look at the grounds, there's actually no difference. So that's how we can argue it. That even Christians, two Christians, or one Christian, one atheist, or two atheists especially, right, will suffer from adultery, will suffer from unusual cruelty, like domestic violence, insanity, affliction of incurable disease, etc. So, I'm just telling you that I think it's possible to go to the Supreme Court to legalize divorce, but only for these specific grounds. So this would still be limited divorce, but would still be a wider divorce than the divorce we have now for Christians or for atheists. Because the law that applies to us is not the code of Muslim personal laws, but the family code. And the family code only allows annulment. Annulment and voiding marriage talks about consent before the marriage. It does not talk about if after the marriage you don't want it anymore. Right? So divorce is if you change your mind after the marriage, even if you wanted it before, then you can separate. Right? So that's not allowed to atheists, to Christians, etc. So this can be done both under the separation of church and the state and the equal protection clause. That there is no difference, and to give divorce to Muslims only in terms of this seemingly secular grounds, right? It looks religious if you read the code, but if you think about it, again, this can happen to anyone, right? So, based on two grounds, we can actually pressure the Supreme Court for petition against the code of Muslim personal laws to the Supreme Court to say, Supreme Court, everyone should have divorce in terms of this grounds. And this one is totally an impact litigation. So, the conservatives and the Christian majority and the Catholic majority would be so riled up. More than same-sex marriage, I would imagine. Or maybe equal only. But definitely, so this will be an issue. And this will raise awareness as well, again, about the lines of separation of church and the state. If you think about it, the only reason why we are denied divorce is because of the Catholic Church's stance on like the permanence of marriage. The idea that only God can divide what has been put together, something like that. So, yeah, so this would promote secular humanism because even if we lose this case, but I don't think if we do it, we will lose it as long as we do it correctly, right? Even if we lose this case, you make divorce an issue, right? It's always an issue, right? But people, candidates, kasi they can always ignore it. For example, compare same-sex marriage this year, they cannot ignore it. Because last year, the United States legalized it, and then I filed a case, and then more people were reacting to it, journalists are asking about it, so it's already became an election issue. Divorce, it's not really an election issue this year, although people ask about it, right? So if you do these things and the conservatives react, it becomes an election issue. So that's a good thing as well, even if we lose the case. So this is the second one. So this is more radical than the Supreme Court seal. Definitely more radical. Third one, the third one is the most radical. So this is the fight of all fights usually of conservatives versus humanist thought, science and reasoning, etc. So how can you also file a case to legalize abortion? So abortion right now is absolutely banned under 256, 258, 259. Meaning, even if the woman chooses it, even if the grounds of the woman telling the doctor and the doctor helping her are based on life-threatening instances, rape or incest, there is no exception. You will still be arrested, you will still be convicted. Right? That's, if you read the revised penal code, it's absolute. Now, how do we go about legalizing it? We cannot legalize it fully. We cannot legalize it fully because our Constitution says in Article 2, Section 12, the state shall equally protect the life of the unborn from conception and the life of the mother. Equally protect. So, abortion, unfortunately, is constitutionally grounded. The ban on abortion is constitutionally anchored. So if we want to fully liberalize abortion, that has to be removed or watered down. However, this same provision can be used by us to legalize abortion partially. How? Why? Because again, as I said, abortion is absolutely banned now, right? But this provision says it shall equally protect the life of the mother and of the unborn. Is there an equal protection when there's an absolute ban on abortion? We can argue no. So there's no equal protection if the life of the mother is at risk. There's no equal protection of the life of the mother in terms of quality of life, in terms of privacy and autonomy if she's raped and she's forced or she does not have the option to abort or incest. So if ever, another impact litigation would be people filing a case with the Supreme Court to declare the revised penal code that those parts unconstitutional, partially, based on this provision. So let's just go back. How do we do it? So I said petitions or letters, etc. This one, as I said, anyone can file it, a letter, anyone can write it. Hopefully, if we do this, it is a broad coalition of most of the humanist and atheist groups. The second one, for divorce, this one, we need someone who is married and who will admit to the nation or to the whole country that he or she wants divorce. And that he or she is either atheist or agnostic or the caucus are mixed, something like that. Otherwise, it is not that strong. So if we as a group humanists find it happy, it's losable as well. The more winnable case is if two people claim, and these two people are married, they claim they want divorce. One of them claims one of them committed adultery or the other committed adultery or other committed unusual cruelty, etc. And they want divorce. Something like that. And of course, either that they're atheist, agnostic, or not of the same religion. This, I wasn't able to explain this. John Paliga, Sherry Mendez, one of them is Muslim, one of them is Christian. The reason why this is a very interesting case, so when I saw it, I thought, okay, we can legalize divorce by invitation. It's because technically, the Code of Muslim Personal Laws should only apply if the situation involves two Muslims. This is a new situation. The Supreme Court implemented the Code of Muslim Personal Laws to not two Muslims, but even with just one Muslim. So we can argue there something about different religions, atheists or agnostics who also want divorce. So here, if we do want to file this, we need two people who are married and it will fall under the characteristics that needs to be there for them to claim that they are like this situation. For the third one, for this one, we need a woman who either will claim that she had an abortion before or who will claim that she wants to have an abortion in the future. But the best one is that she has an abortion before. But better if she had an abortion like 20 years ago. So even if she admits, she cannot be prosecuted because there's a timeline, a cap on when you can prosecute someone for a crime. So anyway, either a woman who admits that she had an abortion, or a woman who will admit that she wants an abortion, or a woman who was raped, unfortunately, and would say she would have wanted an abortion, something like that. So this would be the woman in relation with certain admissions about abortion, to be the one that will file the case. Okay? So next slide. So the purpose of pursuing litigation or these things, I've already discussed it a bit, right? Is one, for me, in terms of trying to convince you guys why this is a good thing, is for us to try to push the Philippines towards the framework of strict neutrality. So again, traditionally benevolent, and there are still a lot of justices who are benevolently neutral, but recently it's becoming strict because it's too glaring that there's establishment. So they're becoming strict. But we have to hopefully make that cohesive or sustainable. Second, create social awareness, not just of secularism in terms of because secularism is, as Andy said, not anti-religion. I would say secularism is actually pro-religion. Why is it pro-religion? Because the only way you can be guaranteed to have free exercise is if you guarantee the free exercise of others and not establish any religion, right? The secularism is pro-religion. But aside from that, aside from creating social awareness about secularism, specifically, we have to raise awareness about irreligiosity or atheism. At worst, right? Because people think atheists, how can they be good people, things like that, right? And then third, assert that right to irreligiosity and atheism under the framework of secularism, which has never been discussed in the Supreme Court. Now, what you probably would ask, and you can still ask later, why is the Supreme Court so important? Why litigation, etc.? One, the Philippines is a legalistic country. We give so much deference to lawyers, the law, etc. The law holds so much power. So actually, if you attack this institution of power or this context, it will cascade. There will be a knock-off effect or spillover into other areas for how people will think. So that is why I advocate pursuing certain impact litigation techniques. So there are other laws you can attack, but this three would be the most impactful, I would say, and can be won for now. Do I have another slide? Okay, so that ends my discussion about impact litigation.